The Pilgrims fled religious persecution, but was religious freedom a reality in Plymouth or somewhere else? Hit those holiday roads with us as we discover the origins of this vital First Amendment right and explore stunning shoreline views along the way.
Boston's been great and fantastic, and we are on our way down out of Boston. We're south of Boston. We're in Quincy. And when you think of Boston and you think of breakfast, you think of Dunkin Donuts. So I think of the old commercials from the 80s when it's time to make the donuts. But here we are at the original Dunkin from 1950 here in Quincy, Massachusetts. Let's see what they got inside. Well, there is a view of Massachusetts Bay. And that is a harbor that is better known as Plymouth Harbor. Here is Plymouth Rock. Where the Pilgrims landed. Here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This actually is a rock that is probably about 6 feet long, about 4 feet wide, and a few feet high, 3-4 feet high. Doesn't look all that imposing, although it is within this large structure here in Plymouth. Actually, the Plymouth Rock itself was much larger, and then over the years, individuals, towns, ancestors, whatnot, they come and they chisel off pieces and pieces and pieces, souvenirs taken home with them, keep it on their mantelpiece. My grandfather came on the Mayflower, so on and so forth. Well, the Mayflower was here in 1620. Many of us know the story, obviously, but here we are in Plymouth. I believe they were looking to do some construction works or whatever the case was in the 1700s, and an older gentleman in the town at the time said that that they should not. They should not continue with the works until they memorialized Plymouth Rock. And he identified the actual boulder, the actual location, and of course himself also noting that it was much larger. But he had identified the location that was pointed out to him by his grandfather when his grandfather, along with the rest of the Pilgrims, had set foot here on Plymouth Rock. So this is Plymouth Rock. There is a park over here, Plymouth Memorial State Park, here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And as we continue on down, it's right on here on the waterfront. Very, very pretty. Now here in Plymouth, they have museums. Pilgrim Hall Museum up that way. There is a Living History Village, Plymouth Plantation, Living History Village. We're not going to be visiting that today. I guess the gentleman's name, Elder Fonts. Elder Fonts identified the rock in 1741. Was accidentally broken into while being moved to the town square, but there were parts of it that were removed and chiseled off as well. But here is where Miles Standish and William Bradford, the first governor, here began the colony, the beginnings of the colony of English settlement, of permanent English settlement up here in the Northeast. Those of us from the Northeast are very familiar with the story of the Pilgrims, and it's remained in American history textbooks. But obviously, it's a much more complex history for American settlement, as we saw earlier in Maine at St. Croix Island, where the French had settled as well. Of course, we know that the Vikings had explored up through here as well, earlier than Christopher Columbus. But between Jamestown, Roanoke, a lot of different settlements, some failed, some were successful. But over here on the harbor front, they also have the Mayflower II that you can board, and that is a replica of the Mayflower. Obviously, the original Mayflower was dismantled for need of timber and supplies and things along those lines. But this is a replica here called the Mayflower II, and you can go on and take a look as to what the original Mayflower would have looked like or experienced, or what that experience may have been like for the harrowing tale of their winter, their trek over from the old world to the new world and such. So this is Plymouth, Massachusetts. There is a lot more here to see, but we are going to be on our way. We have a lot of other places to hit today, so we wanted to see Plymouth Rock in and of itself. And we have a beautiful day in a beautiful park here in Providence, Rhode Island. And here we stand in Providence, Rhode Island, in front of the Rhode Island State House. The Rhode Island State House, Rhode Island being the smallest state in the Union, and was actually the latest to ratify the Constitution to become a part of the United States when the Constitution was being ratified. George Washington was inaugurated president while there were only 11 states. North Carolina and Rhode Island had not yet ratified the Constitution, and therefore were independent nations, if you would, until they ratified it. But Rhode Island, the smallest state, and their Capitol building here, their State House, is actually quite large and impressive. So you could say that they like to compensate, like the stereotype, small things compensate with large things. So here you go. But this is a very, very pretty State House. On the top is a statue of Independent Man that embodies the spirit of freedom and independence that is part of the heart and soul of the founding of Rhode Island and the mission of Roger Williams. We'll see and learn more about Roger Williams later on today. But in here, Rhode Island seeks to hold forth a lively experiment that a most flourishing civil state may stand and best be maintained with full liberty and religious concernments. Roger Williams was part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony that had arrived in 1630, separate from the Pilgrims of 1620 in Plymouth. Massachusetts Bay Colony was a Calvinistic theologically religious group of Puritans that came on over, and their mission was to establish a city on a hill to shine the light of their religious beliefs to the world, and show that it can match as a civil state as well. It didn't quite end so well, from that standpoint, although their motives were pure in that stance, but it didn't end so well. As a matter of fact, Roger Williams felt that he was being discriminated against by this particular group. So he eventually packed up and moved on down here to Rhode Island and began the colony of Rhode Island here. And we'll see some more about Roger Williams. But this here is the Rhode Island State House, a large and pretty state house in the pretty capital of Providence. Oh, we're at the Roger Williams National Memorial Visitor Center here in Providence, Rhode Island. So not sure if this is a single location, multiple spots along the way, but we're going to check out Roger Williams and the founding of Rhode Island and its strong sense of liberty, freedom, and independence. Here in the heart of Providence, we have some green space that serves as the grounds of the Roger Williams National Memorial. There is no national memorial for Roger Williams in prominent places like other founders, like founders of the nation that are in Washington, D.C., But this is where they have the green space here in his name. There is a statue that bears a figure. It's not necessarily a likeness. There's no likeness, there's no painting, nothing. We really don't know what Roger Williams looked like himself. But here, there is a freshwater spring that attracted Roger Williams to this site. And so when Roger Williams was in Massachusetts, he was actually banned from Massachusetts. He was arrested for his ideas and then banned from Massachusetts, and he made his way outside of the colony down here, so himself enduring an ordeal of 14 months or so through harsh winters, finding again friends amongst the Native Americans, and developing friendships, and then trading with them, and becoming finding a way with them to purchase land for himself, and to start a colony that supported freedom of all types. You'll notice here the views of Roger Williams about the freedom of one to worship as one pleased, or to choose to not to worship if one pleased. He was just as disheartened with the entanglement of church and state in England as what he found in Massachusetts. When he went searching for when he went back to England to receive a royal charter for the Rhode Island plantations, he actually wrote books about these things, and was ordered by the church government in England for his book lambasting the entanglement of church and state to actually be burned. So his book was not accepted, but it demonstrates his commitment to a true and absolute soul freedom to all people of the land impartially. So you'll find in Rhode Island the first Baptist church in America, the first synagogue in America, and you'll also find there's the first Quaker meeting house in America as well was here. Roger Williams disagreed heartily. Roger Williams was a preacher, a religious pastor as well, strongly committed to his biblical faith, but he disagreed strongly with the Quaker views. But in a spirit of peace and true freedom, Roger Williams welcomed them with open arms. He founded Providence and Rhode Island with an idea of freedom and openness and companionship. And as a matter of fact, that freedom was more than just religious for Roger Williams as well. Freedom involved freedom from social or gender roles as well. Rhode Island actually brought a man to the court for interfering with the man's wife's religious convictions. So again, just a very interesting beacon of freedom here in Rhode Island that is significantly stronger than many other locations. Even as we look at colonies in the New World as seeking religious freedom, that truly was the case, but Roger Williams truly sought a true, free conviction of the soul. This is a lovely green space over here. Roger Williams National Memorial. In many, many towns all across America, it would not be uncommon at all to find the First Baptist Church in Lincoln, the First Baptist Church in Salem, the First Baptist Church of Meadville, the First Baptist Church of any particular town. But here in Providence, Rhode Island, we are at the site of the First Baptist Church, founded by Roger Williams in 1638, the first Baptist church in America, the oldest Baptist church in America. A tall building, tall steeple up there. This was the church founded by Roger Williams in his quest to found a colony that embraced all sorts of religious freedom, including the freedom to not worship if desired. Beautiful building, still an active church, active congregation. They do give tours on certain days of the week. They give tours on Sundays after Sunday services. We do not fall on one of those days while we're here, but it is pretty impressive to witness such a historic site. Now, this particular building obviously was not built in 1638. It's been remodeled. This particular structure was erected, I believe, in 1770s, I believe. But there we go. Through the trees, you can see how tall that is. The First Baptist Church in America. Here without the tree, as we are here on the side of a busy road, you get a better scope of the grandeur of the steeple. Zoom in a little bit more. The First Baptist Church of America, overlooking downtown Providence, is Roger Williams, or at least a representation of Roger Williams, a memorial to the founder of Providence, the founder of Rhode Island, overlooking his city of freedom and independent conscience of soul. Here they've actually also buried some of his ashes, so they say, inside from his grave. Some dust from his ashes. There is a park down below, a lower level to this park, where you can more easily see the front side of Roger Williams, but that's undergoing some maintenance currently, so it's closed off. Still a fantastic view of the skyline of Providence. From this vantage point of Prospect Terrace, we got Roger Williams right here. We have the steeple of the meeting house of the First Baptist Church in America. And we have the Rhode Island State House right over there. Definitely a pretty view from a pretty park. Clouds are rolling in. I think we're going to head on down to Newport. I'll see you there. The Touro Synagogue, the first oldest synagogue in America, the oldest synagogue in America, from 1654, coming across, finding their way to New Amsterdam, establishing the first Jewish community. Here in New England, in Rhode Island, they found their freedom to worship, openly welcomed. 1790, upon the beginnings of the new Constitution of the United States, George Washington wrote a letter to the congregation here in Newport, reinforcing their freedom of religion, freedom to worship. So we're going to check out the Touro Synagogue today. Isaac Touro was born in Amsterdam in 1738, trained for the Jewish ministry, traveled to New York, and then moved to Newport around 1759. And that's where he had served Newport's Jewish community as spiritual leader for 16 years. Their first 3 children were all born in Newport, and Abraham and Judah continued the synagogue here and then upon their death, they had left significant contributions both to the synagogue and to the city of Newport, as well as to both Jewish charities and Christian charities. Abraham and Judah Touro, setting standards for American philanthropy. So we're going to check this out. The Touro Synagogue has a couple of levels of displays here as well before we go on the tour. And it really describes the development of religious liberty and religious freedom through Rhode Island and the colonies, and then leading into the American Revolution and then the new American government. Because then questions would arise, particularly since religious intolerance was still a thing amongst colonial America. So the Puritans had driven out various groups. In Georgia, there was discrimination against Catholics. A lot of individuals did marginalize or discriminate against what they would call Jews, Turks, and other infidels. So this is an experiment that Rhode Island had in terms of religious freedom, and then wondering if that would continue in the new government. They sent dispatch letters to George Washington asking for clarification, and they were very happy to find: to bigotry, no sanction; to persecution, no assistance. George Washington.
Our tour guide introduced us to the rise of Newport as a thriving community of merchants and religious outcasts who worked together in harmony and made quite a good living, including a Jewish community of about 13 individuals who made Newport their home in 1654. Over time, the community decided that it should have a proper rabbi and an actual synagogue, so they heavily recruited the best architect around, and the structure was completed in 1763. Not the first synagogue in the United States, but the oldest.
And it's a story that's repeated throughout American history. Here we had a young man probably full of energy and ambition and ready to find his future in the new world, and he got on that show and found himself at the tender age of 19 or 20 as the spiritual leader of the Jews out here in Newport.
The Touro Synagogue, a very American and a very Jewish story of perseverance during persecution, the development of religious freedom, religious liberty here in Rhode Island, and then also philanthropy, tolerance, acceptance, and thriving. Even as the town of Newport loses its community during the Revolutionary War, the synagogue still stands as Newport thrives again in the 1880s during the Gilded Age, and there's a resurgence. The then shuttered synagogue reopens back up, still remains to this day. It's a powerful story with stories that you don't often hear, especially if one is not Jewish, about the importance of religious freedom and religious toleration.
We had one more adventure on our day in Rhode Island, and that was to take in the breathtaking scenes of the beautiful Rhode Island coastline in Newport.
The Cliff Walk, Newport, Rhode Island. The cliff beach, the rocky beach, in the backyards of Gilded Age mansions, some of which now belong to university. But we're going to see some mansions from the Gilded Age. I believe some of them are available for tours, but we're not going to be touring any of them. That 1880 to 1890 to early to 1900 time frame that I don't recall much from my American history studies in high school or college. Mostly because there didn't seem to be a lot of high stakes political action or war action or after the Civil War and before the World Wars. But it's where a lot of rich folks regained their money, the robber barons and the industrialists and such. But it looks like here we got an art installation that is just installed here of the elephant migration. So I believe this was just installed literally just a few days ago. Check some of this out a little bit. looks like it was made from proceeds from the sales of these. You're available to purchase these. Support particular nonprofits helping the herd migrate across the U.S. and discover their American friends along the way. There's a QR code if one would be so inclined. That probably explains more about what they have going on here. Personally, when I think of surfing, I think of the idyllic locations like California, Hawaii, Australia, the South Pacific. Not necessarily Rhode Island, but as you can see, we got surfers out there, and the waves here along the breakers make for good surfing. So some sections of the cliff walk are walking on the rocks, but these are large boulders, but they're quite flat. You don't have very many gaps to overcome, no like sharp angled edges to where you might really roll an ankle if you're paying, you know. So yeah, so long as you're paying attention to where you're going, this is not a difficult section of the cliff walk. Here we have the Chinese tea house. We go underneath the Chinese tea house through the tunnel. So the camera in light brightens all of this, but from your own eyes, this here is pretty pitch black. You can hear the echo through here. And coming out the other side. Tunnel number 2. Nowhere as near as dark as tunnel number 1, but this one has a significantly more metallic echo. This section is a little bit rougher than the others. Still not terrible, but a little bit rougher than the others. And much more down at sea level too. All of this is absolutely gorgeous, and you could easily see why those with the means would love to build a large house out here. Or to purchase a large house out here that's already been built from the 1880s or so. I don't know how many of these homes down through here have been passed down from family to family or sold and purchased by new wealth or whatnot, but these are some beautiful, gorgeous homes from the Gilded Age. Opposite an absolutely breathtaking background. This is the waves
point of the cliff walk. Technically not the end of the cliff walk. We didn't do the very, very beginning. We went from the 40 steps to the waves. There is a little section around the corner as well. It's one of the more moderate sections as opposed to the more difficult sections. There were some difficult sections here in terms of just balance and keeping your footing there on the rock. Most of the rock sections were fairly stable, but there were some slow go parts. But this is the cliff walk in Newport, Rhode Island, and it was just fascinating on both sides of the walk, both of nature and of wealth.
The cliff walk was a really great way to finish out our very long day. So if you've ever been to the cliff walk, or Plymouth, or Rhode Island in general, let us know in the comments. Let us know your thoughts, your experiences, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Let's hit those holiday roads.